Here we go. I'm good. It's all good.
I wasn't expecting some of the things I heard. I wasn't expecting this film. I knew nothing of. Can you hear me in the back? Raise your hand if you can't hear me. I'll speak. I knew nothing about this, and I cried through part of it. My children must have put this together. Sue, thank you very much, kids. I love you. Thank you all for being here. I'm really very touched by the warmth and the affection that has flowed through this hall this evening. At my 60th birthday at the Washington Arts Club down the street, which was filled, unlike this party, mainly with out-of-towners from Montreal and Toronto and Florida and New York. They came, including my former boss from the Montreal Star, a number of people. Sue decided this time it was unfair to make people feel obligated to come to Washington in the middle of January. But at my 60th birthday, my then rabbi, Jeff Wahlberg, spoke about the 10 things you'll never hear Stan Cohen say. And number one on his list was, I'm speechless. I'm not there yet. I want to say thanks, Sue, for everything she did to put this party together. That part of what she does professionally, press breakfasts, briefings, luncheons, breakfasts, conferences, but she really did a fantastic job, and I thank you and I love you for this. But there's a but here. Originally, we were going to have two parties, one in New York and one here. So I drew up lists of invitations. And there were about 100 people on each list. And she said, no way. So then she began acting like the Republicans on the Hill during the debate over extending long-term uninsurance. She said, okay, I will give you X on the list, whom are you taking off? I'll give you one for one. So ladies and gentlemen, you are it. You represent many communities here tonight. My work at the U.S. Department of Education, my synagogue, various committees and boards that I'm on, alumni functions, fundraising activities, etc. As I told Ira Berkauer over here, he represents 20 other members of the Religious Practices Committee of Adas Israel. The other 19 were knocked off the list. The people that I've known longest here, except for my sister, were Sally Green, now Sally Kranz, whom I met in 1951 in sophomore English at NYU. Marvin Kranz, whom I met the same year, around 1951, at the Jewish Culture Foundation student organization at NYU. I introduced them. They've been married for 58 years. Aside from the Kranzes who preceded me to Washington, and my sister, the person I've known longest in this room is Jane Glickman. I started at the U.S. then Office of Education on November 14th, 1977, and on November 15th, I was a speechwriter for the U.S. Commissioner of Education, although I was a Canadian citizen. A day after I started, or 2 days after I started, there was a knock at my door. I opened the door, and standing outside was this very attractive young woman. Are you Stan Cohen? I said, yeah, I'm Jane Glickman. I've been assigned to you as a researcher. And we have participated in each other's life cycle events for the last 36 years.
Wow.
And it's been terrific.
We talked about the significance of this location. Our first date for dinner after a movie was here. We came back a year later to celebrate our engagement. And when the maitre d', a lady named Gerlinda, found out about it, she ordered up immediately 2 glasses of her favorite in-house liqueur, Goldwasser. And we came back a year later for our first anniversary, and we got served Goldwasser, and whenever we came back here and Gerlinda was here as the maitre d', there were always Goldwasser on our house. Sorry. I've been blessed with 2 very special partners, my late wife Barbara and Sue. I've been blessed with 4 wonderful, wonderful kids. 3 kids-in-law whom I regard as my own, and 6 wonderful, wonderful grandchildren. I think you've met them. I don't want to take the time. Well, I should. You've met my son. Where's my daughter Rachel? My daughter Rachel.
Are you laughing because I survived?
Rachel's husband working together, Dr. John Dinman.
Not that kind of doctor.
Their younger daughter Chloe, and their older daughter.
They went upstairs. They went upstairs.
Their older daughter Bailey is at a B'nai B'rith Girls Weekend Convention somewhere.
There was there too.
My second daughter in terms of age and arrival in my life, Lisa Shore, Dr. Andy Shore, and their older son Robbie went back to college at WashU last weekend, but their younger son Brian is here. Brian's the sophomore who's already playing on the senior varsity.
Thank you.
And my son Norman, whom you met through his beautiful tribute to his dad tonight, his wife Karina Gage, and their boys Eli and Will are here somewhere. And Hannah, whom everybody knows. Everybody's known her since she arrived in our life at the age of 2 years, 9 months, or 10 months.
You don't know?
People think they know me. I'm outgoing, I'm a people person, I've never met a party I didn't like. There's another side to me that people don't see often. I can be very introspective, philosophical. I'm too cognizant of the aging process. I feel very strongly about my Jewish identity and my Jewish ethnicity, and everybody knows that. My non-religious friends think of me as religious. My religious friends think otherwise. But I try to walk humbly with my God and find a sense of my purpose in this world, to do good deeds, to be ethical, to care about others, to be forgiving, to want to make the world a better place, to give back to my communities and institutions because they've given to me. And I'm so proud to have passed this on to my children and grandchildren, the value of community service, as my parents demonstrated that value to me. These are some of the things you don't know about me. I began my organizational life and going to meetings when I was 14. I've served on many boards and committees, been on the boards of 4 schools, was appointed to 2 terms by the Minister of Education of Quebec at the Board of Directors of the largest English-speaking community college in Quebec. I've given commencement speeches all over the place. Rachel, I think I spoke at your grade 6 graduation. Several years ago, and I keep joining organizations and institutions and boards and committees and going to meetings. Several years ago, Hannah and Sue has gotten into volunteerism and meetings as well. Several years ago, Hannah had a play date. A friend came over, and at one point I overheard Hannah saying to this kid, "Let's play going to a meeting." In Montreal, where I lived for 15 years before coming here, I also had a stage career as a member of the Yiddish drama group of the Sadie Bronfman Center of the Arts. I sang in the chorus, I had some supporting roles, I even had a lead role a couple of times. Performed about 40 times a year in Montreal, also appeared on stage at the 92nd Street Y in New York, the National Arts Center and other locales in Ottawa, various stages in Toronto, and then did a 2-week tour of Israel that included about 10 performances in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Haifa, and a number of small towns in kibbutzim. Actually, my entertainment career began when I was about 8. I became a member of Uncle Bill's Junior Radio Stars, broadcast every Saturday afternoon on radio station CHSJ in St. John, New Brunswick. My singing voice wasn't great. I didn't play a musical instrument, but I had a unique role. The program was sponsored by a company whose products included Schwartz's peanut butter. And each kid who performed received a jar of peanut butter and a Junior Radio Stars badge. And I was selected to present the peanut butter. But they did give me an opportunity to recite lyrics and poetry. And I made my debut, I think it was at the age of 8, reciting lines made famous by Vera Lynn. This was 1942, World War II. There'll always be an England, and England shall be free. If England means as much to you as England means to you. Lines like that went over big in my home city, which, in case you didn't know it, was founded during the American Revolution by the United Empire Loyalists. We had no Jewish recreational facilities in my hometown, so somebody arranged for the kids in the Jewish community to use the facilities of the CYO, the Catholic Youth Organization. So I swam at the CYO, coached by a guy named Freddie Tobias. He was a Syrian. We Jewish kids always thought he was a Syrian. I also played basketball for the YMHA. The CYO was our home court. I was about 6 feet tall when I was 14 years old. Nobody believed my age, so I had to bring a copy of my birth certificate to prove that I qualified to play in what was called the Midget League. I also used my height to try and join the Air Cadets. They would be happy to consider my application. They told me if I would return next week with my birth certificate. I didn't. Their minimum age was 14, I was 11. Also at the CYO, I began a rather short-lived art career. I studied art with the nuns of St. Vincent's High School for girls. My parents happily displayed my masterpieces on the living room mantel. When I was ready to join the Cub Scouts, ecumenism was again a factor. Virtually all of the scout troops were religiously sponsored. We had no Jewish troop at that time, so I joined the troop at Trinity Anglican Church. Every year the Cubs and Scouts were honored at a Sunday night service. I was the only Jewish kid in the troop. As I took my place in the pew, I noticed something strange in front of me near the floor. I asked what that was. A kneeler, I was told. I couldn't possibly kneel at an Anglican service, so what did I do? I crouched. was not just my organizational life that began at the age of 14. That same year I began working for a salary on weekends and during school vacations. First as a stock clerk in a small department store in a working class neighborhood, then in a fruit and vegetable store, though I was not permitted to operate the cash register or the meat slicer. And then in a high class department store. First fitting and selling ladies' shoes. Then boys' clothing. And then I was in the advertising department writing radio copy. We didn't have television sponsorship in those days. We sponsored radio shows. And one day a letter arrived at the front office that was sent immediately to me in the advertising department. It was from the Canadian version of what we call the Federal Trade Commission in this country. It might have been called the Federal Trade Commission in Canada too. Told us to immediately cease and desist from advertising coats made from Coney Island seal because there was no such animal. The Trade Commission believed we were selling dyed rabbit. I wanted to become a sportscaster. So when I was in high school, I became sports editor of a published high school weekly. I traveled mainly cross-town or a few miles out of town with our varsity teams. They were in a 4 or 5 team high school league. I covered rugby, curling, hockey, and boys and girls basketball. The reporter who covered high school sports for the local daily was Bill Bailey, whose nickname was Boozer. When he felt like taking off or living up to his nickname, I got to do the reporting. 40 cents per column inch. Occasionally I was invited to do commentary between periods of radio broadcast of our local semi-pro hockey team. My favorite memory of those broadcasts of the games of the St. John Beavers had to do with their sponsor, Lane's Bread. Their slogan was, when you ask for Lane's, you ask for the best in bread. I was blown away one night when I heard an announcer say, when you ask for Lane's, you ask for the breast in bed. But the greatest reward of my sports writing career was that I fell in love with the manager of the girls' basketball team, a beautiful and very bright girl named Midge. She was in grade 12, I was in grade 10. Her male friends hated me for taking her out of dating circulation. My male friends envied me. When we first started dating, Midge was also seeing someone else, a guy from a local military academy prep school. Midge and I went to the movies almost every Saturday night. In my town, there weren't too many first-run movies. Most movies either played Monday through Wednesday or Thursday through Saturday. So I would select a movie to go to on Saturday night. And one day, a friend of Midge's named Norma came to me and said, I have to have a heart-to-heart talk with you. Could I please ask Midge what movie she would like to see? And there's a problem. It seems that the other fellow she was dating was taking her to the movies on Friday nights. I was taking her to see the same picture. She didn't want to hurt me by telling me this. Eventually, she did break my heart. She went off to college the next year. She fell in love with someone else, whom she subsequently married. At any rate, eventually I recovered and went off to NYU. And you saw that I was awarded a scholarship. You have to understand that scholarship was worth $160, and in those days it bought 10 credits. You couldn't buy 1 credit at NYU for $160 today. I think tuition was $12.50 when I started. It went to $15 the next year, and the students were raging when it went to $16 another year. After my undergraduate days, I became a teacher at NYU, first as a graduate assistant, a teaching fellow, part-time instructor. That's where I met Larry. I also knew Irv, who was editor of the school paper at that time. I taught in private high schools in New York and the public high school in Montreal. And while still employed as a teacher, I was moonlighting at the Montreal Star. I covered the education beat for a couple of years. did some general assignment reporting, and then I became an associate editor, an editorial writer, and op-ed page writer. Plus ça change, plus la même chose, as the French would say. The more things change, the more they stay the same. In addition to writing editorials about education, U.S. politics, and space flights of all things, I was assigned to comment on some of the burning issues of the day. The topics may sound rather familiar. We're talking about the late 1960s, early 1970s. What were we writing about? Abortion, gun controls, police profiling, not racially, but of long-haired boys, girls in sports, immigration reform, bilingualism, official language, minimum wage, and are our schools failing our kids? Nothing has changed in 40 years. I arrived in Washington, as I mentioned, in November 1977. My family followed at the end of night in June of 1979. And by that time, I was already involved on the boards and committees of a number of organizations and institutions here. And after my marriage to Sue, I tagged along as the lucky spouse on cruises, to many political receptions, to national political conventions beginning in 1988. Sue produced late-night wrap-ups, and I got to meet many media and political personalities, from Bill Clinton to David Frost. And I sat at the press table next to Nina Totenberg during round 2 of the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings featuring Anita Hill. My life took a big turn in 1996. At the age of 62, I became a father again. I really began to lead an intergenerational life. When Hannah went to nursery school, the parents of her classmates were the age of my older children. As a kid, I never had a pet except an occasional miniature turtle or goldfish that lived less than a week. I learned not only to love cats, but to sleep with them. As full and as exciting as my life has been, there are other people here whose lives have been even more exciting. Like Irv Chapman, broadcasting from Tokyo and Moscow. Like Larry Barrett, covering the Reagan White House for Time magazine. Like Herb Bloom, producing coverage of Olympic Games and elections of Holy Fathers. Let me close with this observation. I'm a lucky guy. I'm blessed. I'm grateful. And I expect to see all of you at my 90th. Collected another 200 friends and hope that Sue will allow me to add 5 more. Thank you very much for making this a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you. You have an announcement?
I don't, but if everyone sits tight, we'll have another announcement and coffee.